हेलो फ्रेंड्स, लास्ट वीडियो में हमने आर्टेरियल इवेंट्स ऑफ द कार्डियक साइकिल को कवर किया था. सो टुडे वी आर गोइंग टू स्टडी अबाउट द वेंट्रिकल इवेंट्स. Ventricle events, let's revise about the ventricle event. Ventricle event is divided into two, that is the ventricular systole and the ventricular diastole. Ventricular systole has a two periods, that is isometric contraction, and second is the ejection period. And second, ventricular diastole consists of 5 phases. First is the protodiastole, second is the isometric relaxation and rapid feeling, third is the rapid feeling, fourth is the slow feeling, and last, that is the fifth one, is the last rapid feeling. So we will be covering the each phases. So today we are going to study about the description of ventricular event, that is ventricular systole and ventricular diastole. First, talking about the ventricular systole. When first phase of ventricular systole is the isometric contraction period. Isometric contraction period is the first phase of ventricular systole and it lasts for about 0.05 second. It is a type of muscular contraction characterized by increase in tension without any change in the length of muscle fiber. Without any change in the length of muscle fiber. So as the name itself describes, isometric, iso means same and metric means length, that is there is no change in the length of muscle fiber, that is same length. Therefore it is also called as isovolumetric contraction. Because there is no change in the volume of the ventricle, therefore it is also called as isovolumetric contraction. Immediately after the atrial systole, the atrioventricular valves are closed. What happened? Immediately after atrial systole, the valves, atrioventricular valves are closed due to increase in ventricular pressure. Here the semilunar valves are already closed. So what happened? Now the ventricles contract as a closed cavity in such a way that there is no change in the volume of ventricular chamber or length of the muscle fiber. In such a way that there is no change in the volume of ventricular chamber or length of the muscle fiber. Only the tension increases. Only tension increases in ventricular musculature. Because of the increased tension in ventricular musculature due to isometric contraction, the pressure increases sharply inside the ventricle. Closure of atrioventricular valves at the beginning of this phase produces first heart sound. So first heart sound is produced during the beginning of the isometric contraction phase, and it is because of the closure of atrioventricular valve. Now, what is the significance What is the significance of the isometric contraction? During isometric contraction period, what happened is ventricular pressure increases greatly. When this pressure increases above the pressure in the aorta and pulmonary artery, the semilunar valves open. Thus, the pressure rise in ventricle due to isometric contraction is responsible for the opening of semilunar valve, leading to ejection of blood from ventricles into aorta and pulmonary artery. What happened कि जब प्रेशर वेंट्रिकुलर प्रेशर आयोटा और पल्मोनरी आर्टरी के प्रेशर से ज़्यादा होता है, दैट कॉजेज ओपनिंग ऑफ द सेमी लूनर वाल्व, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ द ओपनिंग ऑफ द सेमी लूनर वाल्व देयर इज इजेक्शन ऑफ ब्लड from ventricles to aorta and pulmonary artery. Second phase of the ventricular systole is the ejection period, and due to the opening of the semilunar valve and due to opening of semilunar valve and isotonic contraction of ventricles, blood is ejected out of both the ventricles. Hence, this period is called ejection period, and the duration of this period is 0.22 seconds. It is of two stages. First stage or rapid ejection period. Rapid ejection period starts immediately after the opening of semilunar valve. Rapid ejection period starts immediately after the opening of semilunar valves, and during this stage a large amount of blood is rapidly ejected from both the ventricles. Large amount of blood is rapidly ejected from both the ventricles, and it lasts for 0.13 second. And the second stage is the second stage or slow ejection period. During this slow ejection period or second stage, blood is ejected slowly. Blood is ejected slowly with much less force. And this lasts for about 0.09 second. Now talking about the end systolic volume. What is this end systolic volume? Ventricles are not emptied at the end of ejection period, and some amount of blood remains in each ventricle. So, the amount of blood remaining in ventricles at the end of ejection period is called as end systolic volume. end systolic volume is about 60 to 80 ml per ventricle. So what is end systolic volume? The ventricles, what happened कि जो ventricles होते हैं, they are not emptied at the end of ejection period. So the amount of blood remaining in the ventricles at the end of ejection period is called as ejection systolic volume, and it is about 60 to 80 ml per ventricle. Second is the ejection fraction. Ejection fraction is the portion of end diastolic volume that is ejected out by each ventricle per beat, and it is from 130 to 150 ml of end diastolic volume. एंड डायस्टोलिक वॉल्यूम कितना होता है 130 to 150 ml एंड डायस्टोलिक वॉल्यूम out of 130 to 150 ml of end diastolic volume 70 ml is ejected out, and it is called as the stroke volume. Normal ejection fraction is about 60 to 65%. Ejection fraction is the stroke volume divided by end diastolic volume expressed in percentage. And what is stroke volume? Stroke volume is end diastolic volume minus of end systolic volume. So what will be the ejection fraction? Ejection fraction is end diastolic volume minus of end systolic volume upon end diastolic volume. This is the ejection fraction. So what is the significance of determining the ejection fraction? क्यों निकाल रहे हैं हम ejection fraction? There must be some significance of determining the ejection fraction. This ejection fraction is the measure. This ejection fraction is the measure of left ventricular function. Left ventricular function का measure होता है ejection fraction. Clinically, it is considered as important index for assessing the ventricular contractility. Ejection fraction decreases in case of myocardial infarction and cardiomyopathy. So this is the importance of determining the ejection fraction.